Rules for variables. When you're using variables in Python, you need to follow some few rules and guidelines. Breaking some of these rules will cause errors. Other guidelines just help you write code that's easier to read and understand. Be sure to keep the following variable rules in mind. Variable rules can contain only letters, numbers, and underscores. They can start with a letter or an underscore, but not with a number. For an instance, if I take starting with number and I'll just put underscore and I use roll number is equal to, I will assign a value 24. So it started with a number. It is obvious that Python will definitely give an error. This should not happen. Instead, you can just give roll underscore number underscore 1 is equal to 24. This can give a correct one. This won't give an error. And the next one is spaces are not allowed in variable names, but underscores can be used to separate words in variable names. For example, we take the same thing. If I use a word roll number just is equal to 24, this won't show any error in Python. Instead, if I give roll and I just give space here and I just put number here is equal to 24, this gives error because spaces are not allowed in variables. So you need to keep this in mind. And avoid using Python keywords and function names as variable names. That is, do not use words that Python has reserved for a particular programming purpose, such as the word called print. For an instance, if you take a print, uh, if you wanted to assign a variable name as a print here, print is equal to 24, then Python will be confused because it is already described as a keyword in Python. There are so many keywords, but you need to be very careful while assigning a variable, and this will give an error in Python. So this has to be kept in mind. Now, again, variable names should be short but descriptive. Generally, whenever we give a variable name, we cannot just give a is equal to 24 or b is equal to 36 because this doesn't make sense, right? You need to be very descriptive. Other programmers should understand your code, so you need to be very specific what that variable specifies. Suppose uh, if we take student attributes, we can take student name as a variable, student name, and we can assign some name here as a string. Suppose Dilip, I can assign. So here it is a very descriptive. You cannot just say something like s is equal to Dilip. A good programmer always gives a very good description for variables so that anybody can understand by reading that code. Well, this is one of the most important thing we need to keep in mind. Be careful when you are using with lowercase letter and uppercase letter because they could be confused with some sometimes what will happen, you just give a roll number here is equal to 24, so you already assigned a value uh, 24 for roll number, and this is stored in roll number. Suppose if you wanted to retrieve the number for this variable, you cannot just give roll number because it is case sensitive. This will give an error, so you need to be always careful while using the words If you are giving a small letter, you need to use the small letter itself. You cannot use uppercase letter instead of small case. So this needs to be very careful. It can take some practice to learn how to create good variable names, especially as your programs become more interesting and complicated. As you write more programs and start to read through other people's code, you will get better and coming up with meaningful names. Well, let us see the same thing in Jupyter Notebook, which is more practical. So let me give a variable name roll underscore number underscore 1 is equal to 24. So if I wanted to retrieve the number 24, I can just simply say roll underscore number underscore 1, which can give 24. So this is a good variable. Now let me start with uh, number 1, and I can just enter roll underscore number. I will assign a value. I will assign a value 22. Let me say. Now this is giving an error because there is a clear rule that variables should not start with numbers. That is why it is giving an error. Now let me take another variable roll underscore number, which is very simple, 21. Now this is not giving any error. If I wanted to retrieve a value 21, I can just enter a variable roll number and it is just giving simply 21. But suppose let me assign a variable roll and roll space and number is equal to 3. If I enter, it is giving an error because as we have discussed earlier, variables will not take any spaces. So one must be very careful while assigning the variables. One should not keep any spaces between the letters. So this thing one needs to keep in mind. So let me take another example. Suppose if I take a variable roll number, let me just take roll number is equal to 1. Okay, suppose if I wanted to retrieve this data, if I use a small letter r instead of capital, let me just see, can I retrieve the value 1 or not? I cannot. I mean, it is just coming from the top. It is coming from the top actually. It's 21, so it is taking here. Let us not give that. Let us say something other than this. uh, let us say student name is equal to Dilip. Okay, suppose if I wanted to retrieve Dilip, in that case if I wanted to use a variable with capital S and then I put all the small letters after that, so it gives an error because Python is a case sensitive type. It won't accept with different cases of letters. So it is always uppercase is always different from lowercase letter. So one has to be very careful while giving a variable names. While giving variable names, it's fine, but when you wanted to retrieve the data again, you need to be very careful whether it is a capital letter or a small letter. So well, that's it for today. We'll see in the next one.